You know, compared to basically every other Mario game, yeah, I always kind of forget this one doesn't have any music on its title screen. Mario just gets bonked in the head 3 times, turns into raccoon form, and then goes on off. Kind of weird in retrospect. I think even the All-Stars version had music. Now, either way, hello everyone and welcome to Let's Play Super Mario Bros. 3. Been meaning to get to this for a while. Like Gunstar, I actually wanted to do a multiplayer playthrough of this like I did with Mario 1 with Scott years ago. I just never ended up getting to it, and I figured, we've been holding off long enough, let's just get to it. How many wizard jokes will I make throughout this? I don't know. We'll find out as we go. For now, let's get into the game itself. The world map's pretty self-explanatory. You move around on individual tiles, getting between levels. You can even avoid some levels if you take the right path. And let's start off in World 1-1. Now, like Mario 1 and 2, Mario does have a bit of momentum when he runs, but there's an actual meter measuring that now on the bottom, the P meter. When you get all the way to the P, you're running at your fastest and your jump is noticeably more floaty. But it mostly works when it comes to the new power-up for Mario 3 that then would vanish for, I think, like a decade and a half until it next got a major appearance. The Raccoon Leaf. When you get it and run all the way to max speed, Mario can fly for a couple seconds at a time, more or less. You mash the jump button to ascend when you're doing that. But if you're good at timing, you can get up to normal P speed, not by just running in a straight line, but by running back and forth across a small area. If you can keep the speed up, you can go on for longer, but it's pretty limited. I wouldn't even call it a straight-up flight. I would say it's closer to a glide, similarly to the wing cap from Mario 64. It was the cape in Mario World that's definitely flight. But we want to make sure we're at full speed towards the end of any given level, and you can tell you're getting to the end when the background turns all black. For the end of stage minigame, like how Mario World would later have the flag post at the end that gets you stars, at the end of any given level in this game, there's a box that rotates between a mushroom, a flower, and a star card. You get an extra life for every 3 cards you get no matter what, but if you match the amount of cards, you get more extra lives. I think 3 mushrooms is 2 extra lives, 3 flowers is 3, and 3 stars is 5. The cards are a bit weird, though, in that there is a bit of a speed and angle element that you hit the end of stage goal box at when it comes to them. So, like, if you're running at max speed and jump into the card box at, like, a 45-degree angle, you're more likely to get a star than not. It doesn't matter too much, because honestly, extra lives in this game are pretty easy to come by, on top of its relatively generous continue system. So you don't need to worry too much. That said, Mario's got the usual staples, though. Mushrooms make him big, stars make him invincible, fire flowers give you the fire ability that you can tap B to fire things at. The biggest thing of note from this game in particular is that Mario has more HP inherently. Because in Mario 1 and Mario World, when you get hit by an attack, you are sent back down to Standard Mario instead of Super Mario. In this game, you're sent back 1 stage. With that said, you also can only upgrade 1 stage at a time compared to Mario World, where if, say, you're a normal Mario and get the cape, you're sent to Cape Mario. So you have 2 HP when you're fully powered up, but I think that's also only in the US version to start? I want to say the Japanese version didn't have that as a mechanic. Now, this level's a bit special. We want to stand on this white block and just duck for about 5-10 seconds-ish. Because eventually, Mario just falls right on through, and if we go to the end of the stage from here, we find ourselves in a secret toad house. 1 toot on this whistle will send you to a faraway land. This is the warp whistle, and also the first actual usable item we found. The warp whistle, if you use it, will send you to the warp zone that you can use to access later worlds. There are 3 of them in the game, and I'm not using them, but I am collecting all 3. Pick a box, its contents will help you on your way. Toad houses and various other overworld places like that mushroom house we see on screen or the Hammer Brother can give you items you can actively press the B button on the world map to use to power yourself up in the case you died in the level. You by and large, any power up in the game can be found there, but there's also a few that are only found there, such as a P-Wing, which is an upgraded Raccoon Leaf. We'll talk more about those later down the road, as well as music boxes and hammers. We'll talk about those when we see them, though. Coins, by the way, as usual, get 100 to get an extra life, and be careful of that timer on the very bottom of the screen, because if that runs out, you do automatically die. There's only a few stages where it's an active threat, though, so don't worry about it, like, actively. Don't get super paranoid. The levels in this game aren't long enough to really worry about it in most cases, because most of the levels in this game are pretty short individually. So as for my own history with Mario 3, this was one of those games that was just sort of always there, because when I was born, my brother already had the copy for my dad's NES. It was easily the first 10 games I ever played, alongside like Ocarina of Time, Mario 1, A Link to the Past, things like that. So it's just sort of always been there, and I can distinctly remember as a kid trying to play multiplayer with him and my mom. We'll talk about that in a moment, though, because I want to talk about Spade Panel coming up here. This is a mini-game where you have to match the images by pressing the A button with correct timing. I usually just mash it and hope I get anything. You get the same amount of lives you would from a matching picture that you would from the equivalent 3-card set. So, Mushroom is 2 lives, Flower is 3, Star is 5. This is our first fortress. Fortress levels are usually more cramped and have some more complicated enemy layouts than the main levels themselves. They themselves are basically mini-bosses before the active mini-boss Bob-omb at the end of every single one of them. But we're not going to talk about Bob-omb because we're not seeing him until next part. Because the thing is about this particular fortress is that if you have a raccoon leaf and build up some speed, you can fly up here for an invisible doorway that you have to press up to enter, and find the second of the 3 warp whistles. How the hell the main character of the wizard managed to figure out to do that on a live stage having never played the game before, I don't know. In fact, I'm partially convinced Nintendo made that a part of that movie just to advertise that it was there. Because that's how Mario 3 was, I believe, was unveiled to the world, period, was the wizard. Longest commercial ever, but definitely one of the more fun commercials. Fred Savage is definitely a little fun in it. So this level, I think this is 1.5, has something else that's new. You can jump right here and hit a note block. Note blocks themselves are platforming blocks where if you hold the jump button, you'll bounce higher off of them. But some of them are red and will send you up to a coin heaven. It's just a slight auto-scroller that skips over a portion of the level and you can get a bunch of coins. Good for getting extra lives. I try to show them off when I can. I try to show off a lot of the things in the levels if I can. Because there's some mechanics that are very obscure and take too much timing for me to really care about showing off. Like, we never see a treasure ship in this LP. In a treasure ship, that's a very minor thing where if you're in, like, worlds 1, 3, 5, or 6, and there's a Hammer Brothers still on the map, you can finish a stage with the coin total ending in a multiple of 11, and the 10th digit of the player's score must match that same thing, so the 10th digit's a 1 if you get an 11. Something complicated like that. If you beat the level at that point, the Hammer Brother will turn into a treasure ship, which is an autoscroller with a bunch of coins. Speaking of Hammer Brother, let's talk about them. Every world has at least one, barring the final world. You get into them, you get into sort of a mini-boss fight where you fight either 1 to 2 Hammer Brothers or sometimes some of their cousins, and beating them will cause an item to drop. I believe the item is set, like, I think this one's always a star. So they're just a way to help stock up throughout a world. I try to fight every single one, but there's one particular one I don't because I wanted to show off another item. More on that later. But yeah, multiplayer for Mario 3 is a little different than it was for Mario 1. In Mario 1, at least its original version, a player kept on going until they died. So I think I even showed this off back in that LP with Scott. If I beat 1-1, I would go straight into 1-2 until I died. So I think I would get towards like World 3 and then finally die. And then Scott would start back in 1-1. In this game, you trade off every single level. It kind of works like Donkey Kong Country in that regard. You can just try to mash through the worlds as fast as you can to try and get a higher score in beating levels than your second player would. You can also, at the start panel in any given world, compete against the other player directly in a Mario Brothers arcade game, lifted minigame, where I think you can steal items or lives from the other. Not that it really matters. For now, though, time for the end of World 1.
Oh, it's terrible! The king's been transformed! Please find the magic wand so we can change him back!
Yeah, notably, Mario 3's story is a little different than Mario games was even at that point. Princess Peach isn't kidnapped. We're just kind of adventuring around and seeing that kings have been transformed into various creatures. I'll talk more about that when I read the manual, probably, I don't know, next part or something. Every single end-of-world stage until the final world is an airship stage. They're all auto-scrollers where you have to avoid some amount of cannonballs, bullet bills. They're not very intense stages, but it can be kind of hard to predict how to dodge things because the levels do automatically sink and fall, I guess to simulate some amount of turbulence. And because of that, your trajectory might not match what you expect a projectile to do, and thus can just get easily hit. It's a little annoying, but you do get used to it a little bit like that. Build there shows it off pretty good. And at the end of every airship stage, there's a Koopaling. Bonk any given Koopaling on the noggin 3 times, and they are out. Larry here just jumps around and fires the occasional projectile at you that's very easy to dodge. The bosses aren't much to write home about, barring one in particular, and even that's just because of how much is going on in that boss.
Oh, thank heavens, I'm back to my old self again. Thank you so much. Here's a letter from the princess.
Again, since she's not kidnapped, we actively get letters from her at the end of every world. Greetings. If you see any ghosts, be careful. They'll give chase if you turn away. I've enclosed a jewel that helps protect you. Princess Toadstool. They usually serve as hints for something in the game, be it how a new enemy behaves, or where to find certain secrets. In particular, she just gave us a P-Wing, which I believe I mentioned a few moments ago, is a raccoon leaf under a different name. The big thing is when you use a P-Wing, for that level that you're about to use it in, your P-meter is automatically maxed for a certain amount of time. So you can even just jump and start flying and completely skip over the level. It's sort of a precursor to the Cape Feather in Mario World, even more than the raccoon leaf already is. With that, though, we're now in World 2, the Sandland, and while World 1 is by and large pretty straightforward platform with no real bullshit in the way, World 2 Beyond likes to have each level have its own unique gimmick or mechanic to it that might show up in later levels every now and then, but is sort of just introduced in that level. For instance, here we got mini Goombas in the yellow blocks that jump around, and when they're jumping around, they're basically completely invincible. And can easily damage you, so be careful of them. Good attack with the tail feather, though, might come in handy there. And you do that by just pressing the B button. This is the other minigame type.
Flip over any 2 cards and see if they match. You can only miss twice.
It's a memory matching game. Whenever you get a match, you get that item added to your inventory. And if you do this over and over again, you do run out of cards eventually, but it does respawn just with a different layout. You can get some pretty good stuff from that pretty quickly, but it is pretty limited in what you get at the same time. You can only get mushrooms, flowers, stars, 1-ups, and coins from it, I believe. You can't get any of the really good items from it, and there's namely like 2 particular power-ups I'm talking about in that instance. We'll see them both down the line. With that, now we're moving into World 2-2, and this is, I believe, the first level that you can do a very particular thing in it, where if you clear the level while collecting a certain amount of coins from within it, a unique event can happen on the overworld map. In particular, for this level, we need to gather 30 coins, which is extraordinarily tight. You can only, I think, miss like 2 coins here total, including during this P-switch timer. So it's pretty tricky to get. I think the Super Nintendo version adds a couple of coins to make this a little easier. And I probably should mention P-Switch, by the way, because I think this is the first time they've shown up in the games, period. Even though I've already done Mario World on the channel. You step on it, coins and blocks switch locations with each other, or rather, they swap states with each other for a limited time, and that gives you platforms you can use that you may not have been able to before, but also coins you can get that you couldn't before. And that just would be a mainstay throughout the series. In fact, by and large, a lot of Mario's identity throughout the rest of the franchise was defined by a lot of what happens here in Mario 3, as well as World, but a lot of stuff started here in Mario 3, like the Koopalings have become super commonplace, starting from Mario Wii especially. So when you get 30 coins in that level, this place spawns. This is a white mushroom house, which has usually rarer or more unique items. For instance, that's an anchor. The anchor is a pretty limited use case. When you use an anchor, it prevents an airship from moving, because if you die in an airship stage at the end of any given world, it moves elsewhere on the world map, which sounds not that bad because, hey, you've already cleared every level, that's pretty cool. But there are some cases where maybe you didn't clear every level, so you might have to go through another level to reach it in that case. But the anchor prevents it from moving, I think, after it's moved the first time. So not so useful, at least in my case, but it's there. new enemies for the series starting here, by the way, are both in this level. Those are thwomps. They slam down when you get close to them, but this is also the first appearance of boos. They might be pretty famous to deal with now, but they were new here. You face away from them, they start moving towards you, and I think they're faster here than basically any other appearance they had in the series, if only because it's their first appearance. Later games, they would usually have a little gradual speed ramp when you look away from them, so they'd start moving slowly, but then speed up. Here, they're just immediately to the top speed. Either way, this is Bob-omb. This is the first one we fought. Bob-omb walks left and right. You jump on him. He gets stunned. He jumps. He'll occasionally speed up and try to jump into you, and later variants of him gain some other abilities, but he's pretty straightforward. Dying to him is, I'm not going to say hard to do, because if you just stand still, it'll happen, but a bit harder to do in some rooms than others, I guess is the way to phrase it. You alternatively can just completely vaporize him with the Fire Flower, which is ultimately more effective because it takes less time. You just need to make sure you have a Fire Flower when you get to him. Speaking of which... World 2 is definitely more reflective of the size of the worlds in the game than World 1 is. There's basically no other world in the game that's only 5 levels on one screen size. Everything else is like 2 to 3 screens wide on the overworld with like generally 6 to 7 levels, but even before the fortresses and airship stages. Not for nothing, Mario 3 has a lot of levels. Do they all do something unique? No, but they don't need to. Like, for instance, this is a level that just loves having its yellow blocks around, which... not very creative, but it gives level design at least. Mario 3, for me, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, is a very memorable game, but I will say if you're looking for a good difficulty ramp and more interestingly designed levels, Mario World's probably the better place to go overall. There is some genuinely cool creativity going on in Mario 3, but World has more going on, period, despite having, for instance, less musical tracks and less environment variety. And that's me showing off what happens when you die. You go back to the last level you cleared, and the Hammer Brothers will move around. The Hammer Brothers moving isn't too big a deal. If anything, they'll probably move out of your way more often than not. Moving back to your previous level you cleared, I think is mostly there for the multiplayer feature? Because it doesn't really do much on single player, besides just kind of waste some time. With that, though, welcome to World 3 Deserts. This is the home to everyone's childhood nightmare, the angry sun. Starting off with this level won't do much. In fact, you can just fly over this little tornado that'll try to throw you backwards, but around now it starts actively trying to attack you. How we pissed off a cosmic entity like this, I don't know, but you can just avoid it by flying over it. Be careful of the quicksand, because while you do sink in it, it is a bottomless pit at the bottom of that, so be careful. But that said, this level is, as with many levels in Mario 3, pretty short. I want to say the longest levels in the game are usually just the airships for the length of them, for the scroll speed alone. Oh, hey, another one. I do believe the way that these memory card games work is that they spawn roughly every 80,000 points-ish? And I did actually look it up quickly a moment ago. There are set appearances, or there's set layouts for the memory card game. There's specifically 8 different layouts. So if you're good at memorizing enough, you can probably figure out what's where by flipping like probably 3 or 4 specific panels over and over again. Not that it really matters. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 2, we're going to go finish off World 2 before moving into World 3. See you guys then.